Okay, welcome everyone to Highlighting Ohio Grant Opportunities for Cultural Heritage Organizations. Thank you for coming. I'm Jennifer Long-Morehart, your shepherd for this session. You are welcome to turn on captions and place any questions in the chat. And then now it is my privilege to introduce our speakers. Amber Bales is the archivist for the Knowlton School of Architecture at The Ohio State University. Virginia Dressler is the Digital Projects Librarian at Kent State University and the current chair of Ohio Preservation Council. She holds an MLIS from Kent State University and an MA from the University of Leeds. When she's not wrangling digital files, she's wrangling 8-year-old twins. Dr. Betsy Hedler has served as the Ohio Local History Alliance's Executive Secretary since 2016 and has overseen OLA's digitization grant program since its inception in 2018. As Local History Services Program Manager at the Ohio History Connection, Dr. Betsy is responsible for OHC's field services to local history organizations, including managing partner relationships with statewide organizations such as OLA, the Society of Ohio Archivists, and the Ohio Academy of History. Tina Ratcliff is a graduate of Ohio University and Wright State University. She has worked for the Montgomery County Records Center and Archives in Dayton, Ohio for the past 30 years. She has been the Montgomery County Records and Information Manager since 2011. She is the current chair of the Ohio Historical Records Advisory Board, the central body for historical records planning in the state of Ohio. Jeff Regensburger is currently a library consultant and LSTA coordinator at the State Library of Ohio. In that capacity, he administers the state library's grants to states' LSTA funds and assists libraries who have been awarded LSTA funding. And Andy Verhoff is the project manager for the Ohio History Fund and Outreach in the State Historic Preservation Office of the Ohio History Connection. An employee of the Ohio History Connection for 30 years, he has worn many hats. In addition to administering grants and coordinating the Building Doctor Needs Assessment Program, he has collaborated with community historians to erect more than 300 Ohio historical markers, consulted with hundreds of local history organizations, interpreted Civil War era life in Ohio Village, and managed 2 historic sites, the Campus Martius and Ohio River Museums in Marietta. He has an AB in History from Ohio University in Athens and an MA in Public History from Indiana University, Indianapolis. He lives in Columbus and is from the Northwest Ohio village of Ottawa. Now let's hear from our presenters.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you so much to the Society of Ohio Archivists and the conference organizers for allowing us to present today. My name is Ginny Dressler. I'll be kicking off the presentation and then handing it off to some of my colleagues here. We will have contact information at the end as well with email addresses, but we've already done our introductions, so I'll just dive in. The session will really bring together key representatives from folks in Ohio entities that provide grant opportunities to different libraries and archives. Panelists will include representatives from the Ohio Local History Alliance, Ohio History Connection, Ohio Historical Records Advisory Board, Ohio Preservation Council, and last but not least, the State Library of Ohio. Each of the panelists here will highlight specific grant opportunities for libraries and archives, along with some practical tips that we put together and strategies for successful grant applications. We've allowed for ample time at the end for audience questions, so as you think of them, please feel free to drop them into the chat. The goal of this panel is to provide information on a range of state-level grants while also perhaps helping to demystify the grant application process. Without further ado, we will jump into grants, and I will hand this off to Tina.
Hello, I'm Tina Ratcliff. I'm with the Ohio Historical Records Advisory Board. We have a regrants program. So just to skim over our regrants program, we have a deadline. It's early. So versus some of the other organizations, you'll see we have a deadline of March 31st. So it's good with our regrants program. It's a good thing to start thinking about it in the prior year, just to make sure that you get your application in and everything completed. We like to have the projects completed within the year. So about, should be a smaller project, should plan to have it done in about 8 months. And the range is small as well, small but mighty. $500, $5,000 is what we like to give out. So if you have you don't have to think big with us. We're willing to work with you. Small projects is what we really like to do. We like to give people that first hand with that first grant that they're going for. So we have to have a minimum of 1-to-1 matching funds for our grant. So that matching could also be in staff time. So that is you have to have that matching money to come in and try to apply for our grant. Also, the collections that are used for the grant, they have to be accessible. So let's say you're a small historical society and you require some kind of fee to get into to look at the collection after it's completed. That's not good for us. We have to have the collection has to be open and accessible. And accessibility is the key word with this re-grant. That is what we're looking for. We want projects that are maybe they're inaccessible now, and you want to help to make sure the public can look at them. So the kind of projects we're looking at are maybe you want to have an assessment of a collection, maybe some help organizing it. Maybe you want some of this cool Hollinger box stuff, some of those really neat spatulas that I love so much. Preservation, maybe you want some help with getting a conservator in to look at what your collection. Digitization is another thing we like to fund so that the collection could be accessible, either people walking in or better yet on your website. That's one of the things we love to fund. But we only do historical records. We don't do artifacts or anything like that. So we're paper people. So we want the paper that's all stored someplace in an attic to be accessible to the general public and your researchers. So we have a website down there, and Jenny is the chair of the for ORAB as well. She's another person that wears many hats. So she welcomes any questions at any time. So feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. And so I'm going to hand it off to Andy for the Ohio History Fund. So you're muted, Andy.
Most people like me that way. Anyway, excuse me. I'm Andy Verhoff, and I find I have to edit my introduction. That's really long. I write a lot. Anyway, so I run the Ohio History Fund, and we give grants in sort of 3 buckets. Bricks and mortar, so that's for the rehabilitation of historic buildings or parts of buildings, roofs, windows, furnaces, things like that. Organizational development, which would be for things like strategic plans or needs assessments of some sort. And then the one that applies to you mostly, programs and collections. That's where archives projects and digitization projects fit, our programs and collections budget. Grants in the programs and collections area range from $2,000 to $20,000. So the minimum you can ask for is $2,000. The maximum you can ask for is $20,000. As far as match goes, it's a 60-40 match. So we'll pay 60% of a total project cost up to $20,000, and you are responsible for a minimum of 40% of the total project cost. It can be more than that, but it has to be at least 40%. And we define, kind of like you, Tina, we define match rather broadly. That can include staff time, it can include volunteer time, it can include donated goods and materials. You just have to, compute the value of those items for your budget. Our application deadline is the second Tuesday of September, which for this year is September the 9th. And we take the opportunity every year to revise the application slightly. I don't wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to rewrite the grant application, because that would be not a good use of my time. So we tweak it every year. We try to tweak it. Anyway, the revised application will be on the History Fund website, which you can see at the bottom there at the end of June. Now, we have application from last year on the website. So if it doesn't change drastically. So if you want to see what the application looks like, what kind of questions we ask, what kind of information we need, you can go to the website and look at last year's application. It's not going to change that much. And our grants are competitive. We fund about one in 4, 1 in 5 applications, and it's the history fund. We get a lot of projects, a lot of different kinds of projects. Like I said, bricks and mortar, window repairs, oral history, apps, exhibits, collections care, digitization. We fund all that. So it becomes competitive. It's also crowd-funded, if you will. So we get the largest share of our money from donations. I don't know if some of you have probably heard me talk about this, but on your Ohio income tax form, there's a line 26, Ohio History Fund. You can donate a part of your state income tax refund to the Ohio History Fund and 5 other causes, but to the Ohio History Fund, and we pool that money and use it to make grants. We also have a cute license plate with a mastodon on it. We sell, or the Department of Bureau of Motor Vehicles sells those, and we get a cut of that, the sale of each plate. People also make donations to the Ohio History Connection for the History Fund. And then we have a pot of money for preservation projects that comes through an endowment that we have. But the largest source of money is those donations. So I never really thought much about taxes before I got involved in the History Fund. And now anybody that talks to me before April 15th, know I talk about it all the time. Anyway, so there's my contact information there at the bottom and the website. And if you have any questions, ask. If you have any questions 5 minutes after we last talked, call again or email again. We're happy to help. Thank you.
Right. Hello. So the Ohio Local History Alliance digitization grants are provided by the Alliance as, on some level, a member benefit, making use of the Alliance's endowment funds to fund them. So the J.D. Britton Endowment that was established, I'm not sure exactly when, but named after a former executive secretary. We ask that collections selected for digitization should be important to the history of the area, etc. We ask that digitized materials must be made publicly available on the internet. To facilitate that, OLA has a partnership with the Ohio History Connection, and any grantee who needs one gets an Ohio Memory account in which to share their materials, unless they have their own way of sharing materials that can be publicly available. And again, as I mentioned, the applicant institution must be an OLA member because it is essentially a member benefit. So Jenny, the next slide. I have like 3 slides. I have the most slides. So we every year we give a total of $7,500, $7,500. Each grant can be up to $20,000. Yeah, that would be great. $2,500. We do ask for a 50% match. Staff and volunteer hours can count towards match, but we won't give you money for staff or money for volunteer hours, which, right. I also mentioned that grant recipients receive an Ohio Memory Collection if they need them. As most folks do, we give you the half of the money at the beginning, and then after you've successfully completed the project, you get the second half of the money. And I think my next slide, Jenny, has, yes, my timing. So we do this every year, and Tina, you mentioned your grant application was early, and I'm like, but I got you beat. So February 15th every year, we notify grantees by April 1. And then for projects beginning May 1st, we ask that they're completed April 30th of the following year, and that final reports come in to me by June 15th so that we can finish paying that out within that particular fiscal year. So yeah, that's what we have on the Alliance grants.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Betsy. My name is Jeff Regensburger. I am the LSTA coordinator and a library consultant with the State Library of Ohio. I'm going to start out by acknowledging a couple things. First, There's a lot of information we're all seeing as we look at our screen, and we're a little bit ahead of schedule. So I'm just going to invite us to take a breath, kind of recalibrate, stretch if you need to, before I get into the next round of numbers and dates and policies that you're going to have to follow. As I said, I'm the LSTA coordinator here at the State Library of Ohio, and in that capacity, I administer the grants to states money, which is federal money that we get from the IMLS, the much in the news and beleaguered IMLS that we've heard so much about. I'm happy to report that here, from the state's perspective, our funding seems to be continuing. We have seen the monies come in that's expected. We have not been given any additional guidance in terms of how to spend that money or what to do with it. So we are proceeding with our grant programs here at the State Library of Ohio as we always have, and that means that they are aligned with our LSTA 5-year plan. They are in compliance with the Code of Federal Regulations 200 that outlines how you can spend federal money, and in alignment with what the at the time the most current dictates of the IMLS were. So good news is we can still offer the grants I'm going to talk about a little bit today, and make those available to people as we have. The two that I think are going to be of most interest to this group are the open grants that we offer and the competitive grants. And I'll take a couple minutes on each one. The reason we picked these out is because these are the most flexible and open-ended. We've got a lot of grants that are prescriptive, that says this is how you have to spend the money and this is what you have to do with it. These offer a little bit more flexibility. The open grant in particular allows libraries to choose, a project or a initiative that they want to do and apply for up to $4,999 in federal LSTA funds. There is no match required, and these are not reimbursement grants. You would get the money up front and then report back to us with budgets and with narrative reports. With the open grant, you are welcome to apply anytime. The applications are reviewed twice a year, in July and again in January, and we do a maximum of 12 per year. As I said, the grant funds are federal money. They come through the IMLS, and we're following all the guidelines as we have them. With the open grant, we do invite institutions to submit the drafts for review if they so choose, and that can be a beneficial thing for people, especially if you're new to grant writing and you haven't done that. It's good to get some feedback, get a sense of what the reviewers are looking for. So, and a fairly low barrier. We like to make this application as easy as possible. I want to go next to the competitive grants, which I believe is on our next slide. These are a little higher dollar value. $50,000 is the award amount, and it requires a 25% local cash match, and that is a cash match. There's no in-kind matching here. You need to come up with the money, 25% of the total project cost. Again, flexible projects here. We do have 3 kind of what I call buckets or focus areas that we put these in. We ask for proposals that would present the library as a community anchor that would focus on literacy or would focus on outreach and engagement. Those are the 3 buckets. It's an 8-month grant term, which means that the money must be spent and the project must be completed within that time. In the case of this one, it's going to be January 1 to August 31st. As the open grants were, same thing, federal money made available through IMLS, subject to all the laws and regulations. And we also take reviews on these as well. So those are the 2 big ones. And I'm going to segue because I think Amber's next, and one that I didn't talk about that the State Library offers through the LSTA grants program is one we do in partnership with the Ohio Preservation Council. So I'll let Amber pick us up there.
Hey, good afternoon. So to kind of start this off, I'll go ahead and introduce you to the Ohio Preservation Council. For those of you who don't know about this organization, we are a membership-based professional group dedicated to preservation and conservation of cultural heritage items and to the stewardship that surrounds those efforts. Many of our memberships are purchased at the institution level, so I'd encourage you to check whether your organization is already a member and feel free to become more involved. But everything I'm going to share with you today is available to the public, so whether you're a member or not, these grant opportunities and resources are open to all Ohioans. And then because I'm the co-chair of Educational and Programming, a quick plug for the quarter hybrid meetings. These are just sessions that are open to the public where you can network and learn and grow in preservation topics. And they are always offered hybrid or virtual only. So they're really a great way to interact with us. Okay, let's talk about how we support the community through grant programs. Our flagship grant is what Jeff just mentioned. It's the LSTA funded Conservation Preservation Grant that we offer in partnership with the State Library. I'm not going to get into as much application details as some of my other panel members are because we spend so much time talking about that during a workshop. This grant is unique in several ways. It's designed for the preservation or conservation of a single item or a very small, concise collection. It is not for digitization or for general preservation supplies, and it does need to link to that LSTA 5-year plan that coordinates with Ohio history. The goal for this grant is to intervene with an item before it's too late, using expertise of a professional conservator to stabilize and protect these treasures. And lastly, to apply, you must attend a grant workshop. This workshop is typically held in May, and it teaches you how to work with a conservator and how to craft a strong application. This year, we've revamped the workshop to focus even more on grant writing skills. Our hope is that you'll walk away with not only ready to apply for this grant, but also more confident in pursuing any of the funding opportunities. So in a lot of ways, this grant workshop could be seen as like an expanded version of this 45-minute presentation. And then a quick note, it's not too late to join this year's workshop. It's happening next Tuesday, May 20th. It's either in person at the State Library or virtual. So even if you don't have a specific item in mind yet, I would encourage you to consider attending. You might figure something out and have an idea that sparks in the weeks that follow. And there will be a summer coffee chat where we'll have conservators in a virtual forum so that you can have like a second place to ask more specific questions. So following up from that, we also offer a continuing education mini grant. This grant goes up to $500. It is open to both students and professionals and includes a free 1-year membership to OPC. What's great about this grant is it's happening on a rolling application process. So you can apply when the right opportunity arises. It's kind of something to keep in the back of your mind as new things pop up and that would be really instrumental to your professional development. This is that great resource. We typically award it twice per fiscal year, so keep that in mind. And so that covers the bulk of it. I encourage you to check out our site or reach out to anyone in OPC leadership if you have questions after this panel. And I will pass it off to Andy. You're muted, Andy.
Sorry, can everybody hear me now? Can you hear me now? Okay, great. Sorry about that. Thank you, Amber. So I'm going to talk about these next two slides. This first one is tips for successful grant applications. So one thing you want to articulate in the application is why do you want to do this project and why now? With the History Fund, we've had applications of equal quality, but one answer is why they want to do this project now, and the other doesn't. The one that answers why now usually gets funded, okay? Because our reviewers will say, well, this doesn't seem like an immediate need. So they could reapply next year, something like that. And I think you're going to hear this throughout our presentation, but read and follow the directions. Everything I learned, everything I needed to know, I learned in kindergarten, right? That's a book from, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago. But read and follow the application directions. And if you have questions, if something doesn't seem clear, you just want some clarifications, call the grant maker and ask your question. We at the History Fund try to be very approachable. If you have a question, ask a question. Like I said earlier, if you have another question 5 minutes from now, we'll talk to you then. So give yourself time to write the application. Our deadline is firm. We will not extend it. It is this year, September the 9th. So give yourself time to write the application. You've probably heard the saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So I would counsel that approach with a grant application, because one afternoon you might decide you're going to apply. Then the next afternoon you might download the materials, and then it might sit on your desk for a week because you've got other things to do. And maybe the following Tuesday you take a look at the materials and kind of figure out what you need to pull together, or contact the people you need to contact. Just tackle it in little bits. Give yourself time to put together and to write the application. If the grant maker offers any sort of training or informational webinars, I go to them, or I would view them. We have a webinar on the History Fund on our website. I wouldn't recommend you sit through the entire hour and a half unless you want to hear me, because it's me going on for an hour and a half. But you can take it in bits, and that's fine. But, do take a look at that if it's offered by the grant maker. And I said this earlier, if in doubt, ask questions. You can ask for an example of successful grant application. We don't post anything on the History Fund website because we don't want people cutting and pasting. You'll see the last point there. But if you want a successful application on this or that project, give me a call. We likely have one, or any of the people represented here today likely have one. If, as Jeff said, if the grant maker offers an opportunity to review your draft, you're welcome to do that. I don't advertise that, but if somebody calls me and said, could you take a look at my draft? I'd be happy to. Just don't call me 2 weeks before the application's due, because that's when all the phone calls and all the emails are coming in. So that's why you want to start early if you want to have somebody look at your draft. For heaven's sakes, get a second set of eyes once you finish or are almost finished with that application, okay? One thing I usually suggest is have a friend or a colleague read the application and ask them if they would fund it. And if they would say yes, well, yeah, you might be good, okay? If they would say, well, I don't know about this or that, or I don't think I would, well, then figure out what you need to do to turn that no into a yes, at least in terms of having your colleague or friend read the application. And cut and paste carefully. It's always fun. We love the Ohio Humanities Council. They're great. They do great work. I have seen applications for the History Fund with Ohio Humanities Council in the narrative, and that's because they probably cut and pasted from one application to another. You can do that, but make sure and do it very carefully and change the names and make sure that the bit you cut and paste in answers the question posed in the grant application that you're working on right now. So, do you go to the next slide, please? So those were tips. Now we have the danger slide, and thank you. I think Jenny put that exploding head in there. Thank you. That's a nice summary of this slide page. These are things I've heard from grant reviewers, such as, this schedule is awfully ambitious. We want to digitize 5,000 photographs in a week. Well, I hope you like coffee and no-dos, because that's what you're going to be ingesting for a week to try to get that done. So that's when we'll hear things like that. This schedule is awfully ambitious. I don't understand the project. What exactly do they want to do? Sometimes when you write a grant or anything, you get so into it that you can kind of lose perspective and lose the knowledge that you have to, explain things to people who don't have the expertise that you have. So make sure that your reviewers understand the project, okay? again, that why now, why this, why now question, why they answer the question. If I hear this question asked, I kind of wonder if that application is going to get funded. Why did they need to do this? Why do they need to do this project now? Okay, now is the key word. And then these two things go together. Why is this in the budget? It's not mentioned in the project narrative. Why is this in the project narrative? It's not mentioned in the budget. So make sure your budget and your narrative support each other. Okay. I had an application once from a cemetery, which will fund cemetery work if it's on the National Register of Historic Places. And, their narrative, okay, they want to do a program about people buried in the cemetery. That's good. And they have a pretty good plan for how they're going to promote it and how this thing's going to work. And then the budget talked about the cemetery stones they were going to restore. That was not mentioned in the narrative. Needless to say, it was not funded. Okay. And again, back to having that friend or colleague proofread it. I've actually had people say, did anybody proofread this before submitting it? That usually comes down to our deadlines, right? Our application is due at 11:59 on September the 9th, 2025. And you can bet there's people at 10 o'clock feverishly finishing up their application. I would suggest you not do that. The reason we have that deadline, people have asked me, why do you have that deadline? Because I'm not going to read applications at 5 o'clock and I'll just give you an extra 7 hours. Okay. Some application, that's fine. Do it, whatever. It's due at 5 o'clock on Friday. Well, I'm not going to read it on Saturday. I'm not going to read it on Sunday. I'm going to read it on Monday. So that's our philosophy behind that. And then I don't understand how they came up with this budget. That can mean a lot of things. One thing is, does the budget match the narrative? Does the narrative match the budget? Do the numbers add up? I have a calculator I use. I mean, I use Excel's formulas pretty extensively too, but I have a calculator and I'll just run down those columns and make sure everything adds up. And if it doesn't, why doesn't it? It's just addition. Okay. That's all I have for those two slides.
Thanks, Andy.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So move and talk a little bit about what are reviewers looking for in a successful application. We put our heads together since we've all been serving as reviewers on different grants over the years. And these were kind of our best questions and tips that we came up with. Does the proposed project meet a need? Can the solution proposed in the application fulfill that need? Is this need clearly articulated, as well as the solution? Again, what Andy had shared, really thinking about the narrative supporting the budget and the budget supporting the narrative. Is the project doable and sustainable? Sometimes there's great projects, but they're just not in the ballpark of whatever the grant term may be. Are the resources requested suitable for the project? Again, does the math add up? It never hurts to double check. Review the request for proposals or other grant documentation and really review, look into what the review process is like if they provide that information. And if they don't, reach out and ask. Some may provide some rubrics available of what the reviewers are actually using as they review applications, which is great. And if you have the opportunity to serve as a reviewer, I know oftentimes it's unpaid extra labor, but this has been really fantastic in my opinion, to really get that point of view on the reviewer side and kind of see what makes a really great application from the not so great. So a great way to get experience and really get some tips and tricks on the process as well. And I will turn this over to Tina.
This is just to reiterate, pound into you some of the best advice that we have. First of all, I think Andy's already put, read the description of the grant. Too many people cut and paste. Be aware of that. People actually read these things. So in detail, read these things. I had a grant that I looked over. The grant was wonderful. It was great. It was a great project. They had in the description of the grant, it said exactly what they wanted to hear in order for you to get this grant. I mean, it was right there. It's just, so go at it like it's a thesis in college. I don't know if kids still do theses in college, but when I did it, the question was right there. You just repeated the question. You told them exactly what they wanted to hear. Usually that's quoting your professor back to them, that make the professor feel like he's a genius, So, read the description of the grant and follow what it says. Time is your enemy. So if you're doing the grant, and you have to have people help you do the grant, invent deadlines. If the deadline is Andy's September 9th, you tell them that the deadline is August 31st, or even 2 weeks before that. So just make up deadlines, whether it's for yourself and especially if it's for other people. And give yourself 2 days to send it in. You could have sent it to the wrong place. That gives you time to correct simple mistakes like that. Details matter. You're asking people for money. So if your a grant application is full of stuff that's wrong, we understand small typos. We don't understand complete sentences that make no sense whatsoever. So details matter. You're asking people for money. But you prove your trustworthiness to us by filling out that grant application well. If you're not sure that this grant is good for you, call somebody and ask. I know Andy, when we were putting this presentation together, he would say that if you call him and say, well, what about this? He might recommend another grant. Maybe the Ohio History Fund doesn't work out for this one. He'll tell you, maybe this isn't your best bet. Because some of these other grants, sometimes maybe you're applying for a grant that the Ohio History Fund, maybe they have so many and they get double the amount of applications. Some of us have trouble getting applications in. So maybe we have $5,000 and we only give away $2,500, and that could have been your $2,500 for yours if you just didn't apply. Ask questions. We don't mind answering questions. So I'll turn it over to the next person.
I just have to interrupt very briefly and say I'm gonna get a crick in my neck from nodding so much. Great advice.
Oh, man. Awesome. Thank you, Tina. I wanted to take a minute through this slide to just talk a little bit about the budgets, with sort of the understanding that all of these funders and all of these agencies are going to have, different procedures and processes that they expect you to follow when it comes to budgeting. They might have a form they want you to fill out. They might want receipts in a particular way. They might want a final financial report in a particular way. So, kind of dovetailing with all the information that we've had before, pay attention to the instructions, pay attention to what the funders are asking for, in particular when it comes to budget. So what I'm talking about here are just some pretty broad and general guidelines, but ones that I think will serve people well. Make sure that you understand the allowable and the non-allowable costs. There's going to be certain things they're going to say you can buy, certain things you can't, certain things you will be able to pay for, certain things you can't. And if you have doubt about what's allowable and non-allowable, then talk to the grants administrator or program officer. Be prepared to provide estimates, quotes, bid specifications, and justification for the budget items. It's likely they will ask for some documentation that says how you arrived at the amount of money you're asking for, and then show some receipts to back that up. So be prepared to have that, and be prepared to have that in an organized and user-friendly way. Nobody's come out and said it this plainly so far, but I'm going to. Part of what your job is as an applicant is to make things as easy as you can for the funder and the reviewers. And that means keeping things organized, keeping things together, keeping things well labeled, all of that. And that applies to the budget as well. The thing, and I'm bringing this in from IMLS and the LSTA funds that we administer. It's good guidance for everything, though. Make sure that your costs are reasonable, necessary and in support of your project. Andy mentioned that nobody likes to see surprise things in the budget where it's like, why are they asking for this? Where did this come from? I didn't see this justified anywhere else. So make sure that whatever you're asking for supports the project that you're asking for in the narrative portion. Understand and comply with all the financial reporting requirements. They will have requirements from you. They will have reporting requirements. Make sure that you're doing those. Keep good records and follow accepted accounting principles and practices. This is more on your end. We don't get into people's bookkeeping necessarily, and we don't get in there. But it's always a good idea to sort of understand what the best accounting principles and practices are, the generally accepted accounting principles, etc., are all good things to follow. And lastly, this is a thing that people don't think of because they like, oh, I sent in my budget, it got approved, they sent me my money, I'm golden. Not quite. Keep your grant administrator and program officer apprised of any changes in the budget. The money you got was awarded for a specific purpose based on your proposal and the budget you submitted. And based on that, you should not be changing things on your end. Most of the time it's fine. Most of the time it's like, oh, I couldn't find this card stock here, so I had to buy it from here. Is that okay? Yes, it's generally going to be okay. What awardees don't want to see, or what the funders don't want to see, is wholesale changes made to the budget and the project after it's been approved. So if you've got any changes in the budget, talk to your administrator and talk to your program officer. Again, everybody's going to do things a little bit different. Follow the instructions, but I think these points here are well taken for any of the grants that we're talking about today.
Okay, and now we're kind of into that wrapping up review portion. The elementary school teacher in me says we need to go back over the content. And so here's a quick matrix of everything that we shared on all the different grants, so you can kind of see where they align and where they're different, and hopefully just a useful resource to help you go back through the slides and the video get posted in the future, so this becomes available to you as a resource. And then Betsy.
Right. So speaking of resources, one of the questions that I know Andy gets a lot, I know that I get a lot, is where can I find grants? What are the grants that are available to me? What are the where do I find them? And one potential resource for that, one that I send people to a lot, is the Ohio Local History Alliance has a page on their website for grants. If you go to the main website, ohiolha.org, it's going to be on the left-hand side. There's going to be a little grants thing, and it will bring you to this one page that has this lovely, there's a screenshot here, a lovely little table of the grants that we are aware of in Ohio for cultural heritage organizations, cultural memory organizations, libraries, archives, etc. As you scroll further down, we go through national grants. We have not updated the availability of state and national grants since in the last 100 days, I'm just going to say. So, for instance, I'm seeing humanities, they may or may not still have funds to grant, right? But as you scroll down, and then that will also apply to some of the national granting organizations that we have listed on the page. We also have some starting points if you're looking for foundation funds. So like there are grant giving organizations, and then there are foundations, which we haven't talked about at all today because it's, none of us are those organizations, but you will often find a community foundation, a statewide foundation, folks who have an endowment from which they give grants or other types of funding. And so there's some good information on that page about that as well. If you see something, if you see something in the, if there's something you don't see on the page, let me know and we can add it. We didn't have the OPC grants until Amber mentioned them to me a couple of weeks ago, and they are now there. So we're happy to add those. I think we'll hold off a little while longer before we make big changes in terms of federal grants, just so we see how everything shakes out. But that is a good resource for folks looking for grants.
We've allowed for plenty of time for questions or a question and answer phase. I just wanted to add, this has been a really great group of panelists today that I've really enjoyed putting this together. So hopefully we can do this again. But I see we've had a couple questions in the chat. And I've got one more slide with our contact info that I'll put up in the meantime too. I think all the things in the chat are more comments and links than questions. So if you want to unmute or drop it in the chat, please feel free.
What advice might you give a first-time grant applicant or maybe someone who's a little intimidated by the process?
Question. Does anybody want to take this one from the group?
I'll start.
Yeah.
Call the program officer, call the grant administrator and say, I've got this idea for this project. What do you think? I mean, just have a conversation, just kind of dip your toe into it. There's a lot of paperwork and blanks to fill in and I's to dot and T's to cross with grants. And we've talked about some of those things, and all the advice that the presenters gave is solid gold advice for writing a grant. But just call them up or send them an email, however you want to do it, and just ask. We're people too. So thank you. That's all I have to say about that.
I know one thing that I was pretty nervous about my first couple of grant applications was kind of just that fear of rejection. And looking back on my own kind of application success rate, I've funded about 50%. And I would say don't take the rejections too much to heart. It's a lot of work to put the grants together. And, maybe you can use that for either another opportunity or, applying the next round. Maybe there's just something that wasn't quite the right timing. So don't get too discouraged, even though I know rejection is always discouraging. That'd be my advice.
Yeah. I'd suggest also, people want to, fund what they need, and that can often be, something big and ambitious, but I think there's something to be said for starting small. If you can identify, a grant that has a reasonably low barrier to entry or a pretty simple process, that might be a good place to sort of get used to the mechanics, get used to talking to program officers, get used to reaching out. In general, I think it's safe to say the higher the dollar value, the more complicated the application is. And it's at the State Library of Ohio, because we have to deal with so many different libraries. And I said this morning at a session, we're very much aware of the fact that, we're working with libraries that might have a part-time director or a part-time fiscal officer or only 4 people on staff and nobody who's ever done a grant before. And that's part of who we serve. So we really try as much as possible to make the barriers to entry low. I've always said, whether it's grant writing or supervision, if you want people to do something and be successful at it, you're well advised to make that thing as easy as possible for people. And that's what we try to do, because we recognize where people are coming from with these grants.
I'll just throw, kind of following up on what Jenny said. You're gonna not everything you write is going to get funded. That's just that. And so you're going to hear no sometimes. And I think the thing to keep in mind is just keep trying and look at their comments, call the grant officer, find out how you can do better next time, that sort of thing. So I just want to add that no is a part of the process. And it's not about you. You're not a bad mother. You're not a bad father. You're not an awful person. Your grant just didn't get funded. So, and that stinks. We say no more than we say yes. We don't like to do it either. So.
Any other questions today? Feel free to put them in the chat or go ahead and mention them.
I have one, which is for the different panelists. I take to heart the tip of articulating why this project needs to happen now, and in some ways for like conservation and preservation projects. Some of that timeline, like some of that seems easier to articulate to me. But do you have advice for articulating some of the tougher things that aren't about something falling apart, but why now, let's say in an organizational environment or a political environment or cultural needs?
Yes. I didn't mean to cut you off, Wendy.
No, that's it. That was
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
I do. So we tell people with the History Fund, why this thing now? Okay. And sometimes it's because the furnace is going to fail in another year. So, okay, fine. But we also say, look, let's say you have a strategic plan or a needs assessment or something that says, that you should do a certain thing at a certain time. That's a why now too. That's an articulation of why you should do this now. So if your strategic plan, your long range plan says, we're going to do this in year 1 and this in year 2, and it's year 2 and our plan calls for it, that's a perfectly reasonable articulation of why you are applying to do this thing now, because you have a plan that says you should. Or maybe you had an assessment done by CAP or MAP or something like that, Conservation Assessment Program, Museum Assessment Program, something like that. And they said, the first thing you should do is this thing. Well, you did that and you got somebody else to pay for it. And then you're coming to us for thing number 2. So we had this report. It said we should do this. So I don't want to overstate the case, but that's a perfectly acceptable and wonderful explanation of why this, why now.
One of the why nows I sometimes see, and I know that my colleague who runs the Ohio Historical Marker Program sees a lot, is an upcoming anniversary. We would like to digitize these yearbooks because it's about to be the 50th anniversary of this high school class, that sort of thing. And that is also a good why now. I would, however, caution you, if you're using that one, that you start early enough. Look at the grant timeline. Are you, if the anniversary is happening in September of 2025, it's probably too late to apply. Well, it is too late to apply for an Ohio Local History Alliance digitization grant for it, or an ORAP grant for it, or indeed probably an Ohio History Fund grant for it. So, if that's going to be your why now, make sure that you've put in enough lead time. But that is also or we're something else is going to happen that means we'd like to have this first, as Andy said. But definitely, if you're planning on I would like it in time for this specific anniversary. Apply a year, 2 years earlier than you think you're going to need to.
And when you're putting your narrative, it doesn't hurt to imply an emergency. It's just like when you're putting a budget together for your bosses. you're saying I have implied an emergency before. So, it's in your narrative, it gives you opportunity to manipulate us as reviewers, to, imply that we need it now, because you know best what you need. So just lay it out there. This is why I need it, and give me the money now.
Another thing that's been articulated in history fund applications is that this thing we want to digitize is starting to get a lot of use from local researchers and genealogists, or it's the only. We had one project, we funded it twice already. It was a newspaper digitization project. And what sort of put that over the top, besides a very good articulation of digitization standards, they knew what they were doing. It was pretty clear they did. But they said, this is the only resource for the history, or it's one of the very few resources for the history of this area. And the microfilm, the microfilm still worked, it wasn't like it was on fire or anything like that, but they wanted to make these resources available over the web because it was one of the few resources available over the web. So that kind of gets at the why now question too, or it did convincingly for the review panel those 2 years it was funded.
And I would add, it might not be a why now piece, but I know in the ORAB grants, we don't usually require, photos to go along with applications, but I can tell you some of the photos that have been submitted as an optional supplement have really spoken volumes about the urgency, even if they didn't articulate it in the application. I think we had one that was a local township council meeting minutes in a, woodshed in the back in the Tupperware bin. That one still haunts me, but the power of an image sometimes can really help applications too.
Thank you. That was all super insightful and helpful.
I think we have a couple minutes left. If there are no more questions, then we definitely want to thank the presenters today for sharing your experience, your advice. It's invaluable. We want to thank everyone attending today. Please fill out the evaluation form. There's a link in the chat and also on page 5 of your program. And we look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow during day 2 of the Society of Ohio Archivists annual meeting. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you so much.